Sorry, can you hear that?
I'm not currently hearing anything.
Okay, I will start over and so that you can actually hear me.
Check out some. Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative. Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski. Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson. Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff. And other initiatives, including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's Growable program and our Perspective series. Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society.
Okay, I will hand things over to you now. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay. And you see the presentation okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm here today from BC's Initiative for Inclusive Post-Secondary Education. We're also known as Steps Forward. And we're an organization in BC that supports the equitable inclusion of students with developmental and intellectual disabilities in post-secondary institutions across BC. I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm living on sort of streaming in from the land of unceded traditional Coast Salish, including Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, Squamish, and Musqueam nations. And my name's Lauren Matthews. I'm the director of BC Inclusive Post-Secondary Education. I'm one of two co-directors of the organization. Arden Duncan Bonikowski is our executive director. My email is on there. It's lauren@steps-forward.org. And my phone number is 604-723-6809. And I'll repeat those at the end of the presentation. So if anybody is interested in getting in touch, they're able to do so. So we're an organization that was founded by families who were part of what at that time was called the Greater Family Movement in BC. It was a movement of families sort of through the 80s and 90s that were working really hard to advocate for equitable access to education in the K-12 system. So these families had successfully advocated for their sons and daughters with developmental disability labels to be fully included in their local K-12 schools. And as their family members were nearing graduation in grade 12, coming to the end of their high school experience, these families came back together thinking about ways to support their children's desires to have the same kinds of pathways into adulthood as their siblings and peers without disability labels were having. Post-secondary came to mind as a pathway into adulthood that many young people choose coming out of high school. But at that time, there wasn't a pathway into post-secondary for students who might not meet the minimum academic requirements for the university or program of study that they were interested in. And they wanted to find a way to make that possible. So they looked across Canada to see, was inclusive post-secondary happening anywhere in the province or outside of the province, and found that in Alberta, inclusive post-secondary was something that many universities and colleges had been offering since the 80s. These families went to Alberta, learned what they could from the founders of inclusive post-secondary there, brought it back to BC, and we started our first partnership with UBC in 2001. it's always helpful to define what we mean by inclusion in this context. And so the way that these families were envisioning inclusion in a post-secondary context, and the way that we envision inclusion when we're talking about post-secondary, is where students with developmental or intellectual disabilities are ordinary members of a diverse community at their university. So there's no separate programming that we offer as an organization. Students are enrolled in the same programs of study, in the same classrooms, in the same clubs, in the same co-op, practicum, all of the things that university offers as any other student. And so I think I've spoken to this slide as well. And the goal of inclusive post-secondary has always been that the inclusion of students with developmental disabilities at every university in BC should be available, expected, and unremarkable. Currently, inclusive post-secondary is available at 9 universities across the province, and we continue to sort of expand every year or so to new campuses. Right now, universities that are welcoming students through inclusive post-secondary are Simon Fraser University, the University of BC, so UBC, in both the Okanagan and Vancouver campuses, Trinity Western University in Langley, the University of Victoria, Vancouver Island University, which is in Nanaimo, Emily Carr University, Nicola Valley University, NVIT, which is in Merritt, and there's also a Burnaby campus, and CapU, which is in Vancouver. So what does it look like? Like I said, students enroll in a program of study that's offered by the university. Could be any program of study that they're interested in, and take usually about 1 to 3 courses per term. For on here, we say sort of 4 to 5 years. That's sort of making an assumption that the students enrolled in a bachelor's program. Those are typically 4 to 5 years. At some of our newer partnerships, there are trades programs and other kinds of programs that are perhaps 2 years, sometimes even 1 year. So really, students study for the same duration of time that any student would in that program of study and in the same classes. Students access their classes through a participatory audit status, which allows facilitators that work on campus to modify the coursework, exams, assignments, as much or as little as needed for that individual student. So students do complete work, they complete all of the pieces of the class and fully participate. So it's a bit different than what might be considered a traditional audit. And it really allows for that flexibility of the support that we offer students to be fully individualized and sort of as much or as little as needed for each student. When students complete their studies, they receive a certificate of completion at convocation from their department or the program of study. And talking about it is good, but it's always nice to see a video and get an idea of what does it look like. This video comes from Inclusion Alberta, but as I mentioned before, the model for inclusive post-secondary here, very, very similar to Alberta. So I'll share this video and acknowledge this isn't from us here in BC, but it really does capture sort of what it looks like and perspectives that we see at the universities here as well.
When we began inclusive post-secondary education, we knew students with developmental or intellectual disabilities were limited by the low expectations that had been placed on them. So what inclusive post-secondary education does is create an environment of hope and possibility. We're seeing students do work that no one, even those with high expectations, had anticipated.
Well, I love university life.
Oh yes, I always wanted to attend university.
Mostly, I always thought about college.
I think we have an obligation to inclusive. We're a publicly funded institution. We have an obligation to serve that public. It's a matter of providing to the society which supports us what that society needs.
I think inclusion is important because our society includes a wide variety of people. So it is helpful to have that reflected on campus life as well.
Just because certain individuals have developmental disabilities in no way implies that they cannot do very complex and difficult tasks.
Well, me, I am doing early learning, childcare.
I'm studying commerce program, majoring in supply chain.
The healthcare aid program.
We were going into territory that no one had gone into before.
What we actually found was that we had very supportive professors who were willing to include students who saw some of the larger moral questions of doing this and recognized the importance of it.
Yeah, we've been including students for the better part of the last decade.
I've been including students for about 20 years now.
The students are of value, and the students that we are lucky enough to have on our campus spend time in athletics and chaplaincy, in the classroom, in the library. So they're not hidden, they're not invisible. They're very, very present on our campus.
I think I was surprised by the number of faculty who've spoken to me about working with students and engaging with them and having opportunities to have them as part of classes.
I feel really grateful to have the chance. I feel I've learned quite a bit as a professor, as a person, as a result.
I learned from the student, and the other students in the classroom learned from the student.
I think including students in my classroom has broadened my experience as an educator in many different ways.
It was a win-win-win situation, and it was such a positive experience that I've been doing it ever since.
When students are being included at the university or college, they are included in regular programs of studies, faculties, departments, courses, just as any other student that's attending university or college.
I'm a personal fitness trainer first year at NAET. I'm taking a course that I'm learning upon becoming a personal fitness trainer.
I'd say one of the strongest things I've noticed with Jeff's growth since he's been in the program, starting out very shy and kind of guarded. After we were done one of the modules in leadership, he came up to me after class and he asked, "Does this apply to me too?" And it was just one of those moments as an instructor where it's like, of course it does. And the fact that he could connect the dots and say that I can be a leader too, it was a great moment to see him take that step. He wants people to recognize him for what he can do.
I like to help people. I like to make sure they get their proper exercise and make sure I have a routine for them every single day. I want to be successful. I'm honored to be a NAET Ook and for this school. I'm really proud.
We had no true understanding of the degree to which students had been affected by those low expectations.
Ever since she started coming to Bow Valley, she's learned how to become independent by, I'm guessing, looking around how people are acting with each other. She's gaining more social skills by sitting with friends from her class and studying, finishing projects and assignments.
She is very interested, but sometimes really shy. I think she's positive and she can bring a little bit change in the community and society and make people think that even if having a disability, they can achieve their dreams.
She still puts in the same amount of work any other student would put into their work. And she's more open to trying new things and figuring things out on her own.
I like going to classes with my friends.
They begin to get perceived for their ability as opposed to their disability. Like lots of students, it's the degree to which you believe in yourself and the degree to which you will or will not allow that disability to speak for you as the definition of who you are.
Our initial fears of Preston attending university were just whether or not he would fit in, whether or not the classes would be too difficult for him.
Well, when I was came here, I didn't know what it was going to be like, right? I was nervous. If everyone came in
as ready to go and as appreciative of the opportunity and the day-to-day chance to learn that Preston is, we would just have this amazing faculty of engaged students all the time. He's just wonderful.
You won't find a bigger supporter of Augustana athletics than Preston, but also the men's basketball team rallied around him. And he is an absolute member of that team, and they had their photo shoot. They wouldn't have it until he could be there. So that to me speaks volumes.
People with developmental disabilities, they're no different than the rest of us. They have talents, gifts, aspirations, things they want to do with their lives.
Cooking has always been my passion. I have always wanted to come to Maine.
Terence is a very dependable student and is very eager to learn, and he gets along very good with the instructors and his peers in the classroom.
I'd like to work with Terence after we graduate. This is about diversity. This is about doing the right thing. This is about being, showing your humanity.
I see expansion. I see that the Alberta government, the communities and families are asking for post-secondary opportunities much more often.
So I will stop the video there, but I think that gives a good picture of what it looks like, the perspectives from faculty, students themselves, and families that we tend to see in BC as well. Perfect. So I just wanted to point out sort of the three kind of pieces that come together, I think, in inclusive post-secondary. One is sort of that campus kind of academic piece, so the courses and extracurriculars that are tied to the campus that students pursue. So students, aren't just in classes and going home. The idea is that students are fully embedded in campus life and whatever that looks like for the program of study and for the university that they're going to. The community piece of it, so social networking with other students for career, pursuing interests, volunteer and work opportunities on campus, and then the career development piece as well. Really, resume and job development is something all university students are doing, and so students that we work for at university are pursuing those same things and have access to all of the same kind of career building resources and opportunities at each campus. Most campuses have some kind of co-op or work study or practicum placements. So often students will pursue those. Many university students will work on campus, and so that's the same for students that we work for as well. And the facilitator role kind of goes into the summer, and so we've kind of shift our focus to career development and supporting students and finding jobs related to what they want to do during the summer as well. As I mentioned previously, we have inclusion facilitators, which is facilitators that work at each university. And so they're folks that are at the university, and their job is to support students. So from that sort of September to April, usually timeframe, facilitators are supporting students with their classes, with extracurriculars on campus, with joining clubs or student societies or student unions, research projects, anything that you can think of that's sort of tied to a university experience. That's kind of the area of focus during that time frame. And then May to August, facilitators sort of shift hats into sort of a career focus and work to find paid, meaningful employment that any university student pursuing the same kind of career pathway would be looking at, as well as volunteer opportunities and other kinds of meaningful experiences. The lens that we always kind of think about is, something you would put on a resume, that any university student would put on a resume because it demonstrates sort of building towards a career pathway. The facilitator's role during sort of the academic year, a few things that they typically would work on would be course material. So modifying course material to fit the individual learning style of each student. There isn't one way that looks different for every single student. For some students, that might be fairly minimal modifications. For some students, that might be more significant modifications. For some students, that could be things like scheduling or creating campus maps to students' classes to help with sort of navigating if that's something that's helpful for a student. It might be meeting professors in advance so that students know their profs before they go to class. Really, it's flexible and broad because everybody is different and the support that each student needs is different. And so the role is to really be broad so that it can shift and change to suit every individual student. Facilitators also work with the student, but also the university community to sort of facilitate and broaden access to things on campus. So facilitators might meet with the co-op department of a certain program of study if a student had indicated interest, and really work with that co-op department to broaden their access to co-op, to think about employers that would be a really good fit for the student based on their career aspirations, those kinds of things as well. Facilitators also support students in finding events and finding communities on campus and sort of building that social aspect as well. And I think the main takeaway is that facilitators work for students. So the language we tend to use is that students that we work for, because that's the case. So the role is meant to be whatever is most helpful for that student, for their success at university, and to build their confidence. As students are sort of getting closer to their 4th or 5th year, kind of the end of their university experience and graduation, the role of the facilitator sort of shifts to support students and families to think big about what comes next, to think about what they might need or want to keep that sort of momentum towards careers and momentum towards an inclusive life that they want to have going. So working to figure out, would it be helpful to hire some support for after university? Or would it be helpful to sort of maybe shift some of those communities from on campus to off campus and make sure that there's a continuation and a progression sort of after university? Thinking about sort of friendships, activities, connections that students have made through their university time that they still want to have after graduation, and supporting students to find ways to sort of do that. Generally speaking, facilitators try to sort of minimize direct support if possible by seeking students, ways for the students' connections at university to be sort of reciprocal and supportive, so the natural support. So an example of that might be, there was a student we were supporting who used a wheelchair, and some of the campus doors, especially for the big giant lecture halls, are really not that accessible. They're really, really heavy. It was, not possible for the student to open the doors to her lecture theater on her own. And so we could have had a facilitator walk to class with her every day, open that door, and then sort of come and open that door at the end. But what worked better was the facilitators noticed that many students from this class went to a coffee shop that was quite close to the class before, and so they supported that student to also go grab coffee before class, and encouraged classmates to walk to class together. And so that way it was actually, student was headed to class with their classmates or with a group of their classmates, and very naturally those classmates would open the door for the student. So a facilitator didn't have to take on that role. Because what we find is when we do that and are intentional about finding those sort of reciprocal, naturally supportive relationships, that often the support that the facilitator can sort of fade out of that support. And it builds those good natural relationships. It provided an opportunity for that student to get to know her classmates better as well. Facilitators also engage with families throughout the course of a student's studies. And we do that in a way that maintains the student confidentiality of adult learners, but so sort of as much or as little as that family or that student feels comfortable with us sharing, and really more so trying to encourage students to share with their families what they're working on and what their plans are and what their goals are and how they're kind of working through that planning in university. But family connections are a big part of many people's life, and so we have sort of a positive relationship and communication with families throughout as well. So who can access their studies through inclusive post-secondary? I'll go through our selection criteria. So We interview every student that applies. We do a full interview with them to get to know them better. And in those interviews, these are the kinds of things that we're sort of looking for. So we look at, does what the student wants to study or do for career align with sort of what's offered at the university? So an example might be if a student was interested in culinary arts and they really wanted to be a chef, they would be wanting, it would make sense for them to apply to a university that offered culinary arts programs. Perhaps SFU wouldn't be the best fit. They don't have a culinary arts program, but VIU would be a great fit. They do. Is the student committed to that full, and here again, it says 4 to 5 years, might not be the full 4 to 5 years, depending on the program of study, but are they committed to that full duration of a full program of study? And to take on other roles and get involved in campus in other ways as well. So really engaging in all of those aspects of campus life and a full student experience. Is the student's family or support network supportive of a fully inclusive university experience? We talk about the difference between inclusion at post-secondary, that there's no sort of there's no sort of congregation of students. Students are in classes and programs of study with other students who are pursuing the same academic and career kind of goals. I do like to say for this one, we know not everybody has family connections. And so if a student didn't want to involve their family in the application process, that wouldn't negatively impact their application. We would sort of just remove this piece and talk about maybe some of those ideas with the student themselves. And so we wouldn't want somebody's sort of personal relationships to make it easier or harder for them to get into university. That wouldn't really be fair. But we want everybody who's involved in the student's life to have a good idea of what this could look like and be on board with it. And is there an opening in the faculty that the student is interested in studying in? So different programs of study have sort of different availability. And so is there sort of the capacity at this time for a student to study in that program of study? We also support sort of a certain number of students at each university. So as students graduate, campus openings become available. So sometimes this one is also, is there an opening for this year or not? I think an important part to sort of point out with our selection criteria is that there are no academics or skill requirements. There's no sort of support related requirements or minimums, and that we have a commitment to supporting a wide variety of students, including students with what might be considered to have complex support needs. We support at least one student at every university who might fit those criteria, and that's a minimum, not a maximum. So this really is for any student who wants to go to university, and we're very committed to that. The cost, so there is at every university some cost of tuition that varies by university and program of study often. So students are responsible for their cost of their tuition, for the cost of their books, student fees, varies a bit by university, essentially the same fees that any university student would be responsible for. But we also don't want the financial piece to be a barrier for people. And so we work with students and families to seek sort of financial support if that was something that they would need in order to access university. So there are some scholarships and student bursaries that are available as well. We've also supported students in accessing some of the federal tuition waivers, band funding. So we certainly wouldn't want someone to not reach out because they were worried about the cost. Please do still reach out. We often can support people to find a way to manage the cost. Our support, so the support of the facilitators, is funded through CLBC. So there's no specific cost for support to somebody once they're at university and being supported to us. but it does mean that students need to be CLBC eligible. If you're not familiar with CLBC, you could do a quick Google search. There's sort of the provincial funding body for adults with disabilities. And if anybody's not sure and want to find out if they're CLBC eligible, you could go on their website and connect with them. If you're not sure where to find that website, please feel free to connect with me and I can point you in the right direction. So the timeline for application, typically campus openings are announced sort of in September or October. So that's when that's sort of the same application timeline as the university. So generally when applications open for the following year for the university is when we'll sort of know whether there are openings at that university through inclusive post-secondary or not. So we post those on our website. And sort of September through September to December, that's when we're sort of accepting applications. So anytime within that period, a student can send in an application. In February, we do interviews. So again, we interview every single person who applies to get to know them better. We know sometimes that might take a couple interviews. And so we're open to that as well. And that's a really individualized process too. So we don't have a standard way that we do interviews. We try to make sure that the format and the way that we're doing those interviews really suit what works best for each person who's applying. Applicants find out whether they were selected in sort of, I would say, April, May is usually pretty typical for that. And again, that's the same time usually that universities are sending out sort of offer letters to students. So again, aligning those timelines. And then through July and August, we start meeting with students. So that's a really important time for the facilitators to start getting to know a student who's going to be starting in September, to start getting an idea of what's going to be helpful for them at university. Facilitators can do things like support students in learning the bus route to a new place, or talking about what was, helpful in high school in terms of academic support, maybe what was not so helpful in high school in terms of academic support, and ideally have a good picture of at least a starting point for what support could look like for that student starting in September. And September is typically the start of the first term, the fall term. And that would be when students start their classes. And I'll give a couple examples of sort of what this has looked like for some students in BC. So I have two sort of examples to share. So one is there was a UBC student that we met with. He knew and his family knew that he was very interested in computers, but they weren't sure exactly what program of study he might be interested in pursuing, or what a career might look like for him. He was a student who at this time, when he had connected with some of the sort of disability specific employment services, hadn't had a lot of luck. He hadn't got a lot of good feedback in terms of good roles and jobs for him. And so family was, a little discouraged and not really sure what this was going to look like. But we knew he was interested in computers. And so he enrolled in the computer sciences program at UBC. And through that time and building relationships with classmates, with professors, and with the department, facilitator and the student and the department worked on identifying strengths and areas in which the faculty, who know much more about computer science than the facilitators do, what the faculty felt might be good sort of career options for him. And one instructor identified that he was really, really good at identifying sort of discrepancies in data. And it was something that had been pointed out as a strength. And so that was something that the facilitators, the student themselves and the department started to think about. where would careers in computer science utilize this kind of a skill. And they identified a research project that was going on at UBC in the marine sciences faculty, in which there was a piece of equipment that was supposed to be collecting data, and it wasn't, this sort of technology wasn't doing the best job at sort of analyzing the data and picking out discrepancies. And the engineers working on the project were finding they were having to go and sit and kind of do that manually within this program, and it was taking them away from the engineering work that they were sort of meant to be doing. And so that ended up being a really, really great employment opportunity and employment fit for the student. So that student was working alongside engineers, doing the data discrepancy work, which gave the engineers the time they needed to go and do what was supposed to be their role with the engineering. And the student who had sort of been whose family had sort of been told, and who the student himself had been told that employment might not be in his future, ended up doing very high value work at UBC, making more than the facilitators working for him for that time period. And so I think it's a great example of the opportunities that can open up for people when there is access to those communities and people to sort of rally around and support someone in figuring those things out. The second example is an SFU student whose career goal since forever, as far as I remember, was to become the announcer for the Vancouver Canucks. And his experience had been that, that was something he felt really strongly about. That was his goal. That was the dream goal. He wasn't going to change that. But lots of people around him really reminded him often that it was an unrealistic career goal. There's only one announcer typically for the Canucks. It's a huge job and a very probably highly sought after job. But instead of thinking about how potentially unrealistic becoming the announcer for the Vancouver Canucks was, the facilitators really focused on identifying what were the pathways that someone would take to move towards a job in sort of sports announcing. What were the skills there? What did the typical sort of career pathway look like to get to that kind of role? And the student ended up being the announcer for many of the sports games at SFU, and working the radio station at SFU and leading, I'm pretty sure it was the sports sort of news updates at the radio station, getting paid work doing that kind of work as well outside of school. And then we found out a couple of years ago, and this was not related to us at all, but he did actually get an opportunity to announce a game for the Vancouver Canucks. So that wasn't a permanent employment opportunity, but it was a goal that he was able to achieve many years after graduating SFU. And I had anticipated initially that there would be opportunities to sort of ask questions and talk a little bit more sort of with folks. But I've realized sort of in starting the presentation that this is streamed live, and so there's probably people watching, but I'm not able to see questions or chat with you in person through Zoom here about any questions you do have. So what I will kind of wrap up with then is that you can reach out to me or any of our campus facilitators at any time. Our website is www.bc-ipse.org. And on our website, you'll find a staff directory that will give you the contact information of every facilitator at every university that we're currently partnered with. My contact information is on there as well, but I'll sort of give it out again verbally here. So again, my email address is lauren@steps-forward.org. And my work phone, which you're more than welcome to give me a call or send me a text if you have any questions, is 604 723-6809. If you're interested, you don't have to wait for applications to open to reach out to us. You can reach out to us anytime. We're more than happy to meet with you, to meet with your family, to talk a little bit more about inclusive post-secondary, to sort of explore what each university has to offer and kind of go through that with students. You can come and do a campus tour at any of the universities that we're partnered with. And a facilitator can meet you to show you around and talk a little bit more about what we do. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from people. Another thing I should mention is there was sort of that list of 9 universities that I mentioned that we're currently partnered with, but we're sort of always open to expansion. The way that we've partnered with new universities in the past has always been because of student interest. So if there's a university that you or a family member is interested in, or that's part of your community, if you're sort of outside of the Lower Mainland or not in the areas that universities that we're partnered with are, definitely reach out to us. Having a student or a prospective student who's interested in going to university has always been the best way to approach a new university and talk about inclusive post-secondary. So again, the takeaway there is if there's a university you didn't see on the list that you'd like to see on the list, reach out and chat with us about that too. We're happy to talk and happy to start the conversation. And so I hope to hear from some of you. I hope that you've found this interesting, and I hope I hear from some folks who might be interested in learning more.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. It was very interesting. I learned a lot. If you're good with everything, then I think I'll wrap up the stream here. Thank you again.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your day.